Okay, I know that many of you are pretty familiar with Word, but I want to spend a few minutes and show a few things here that may be helpful, some things that maybe you haven't looked at. I think that most of you, again, are pretty familiar with the font and the paragraph type things up here, being able to choose your font, your size, whether it's, the text is bold, italicized, or underlined. You can change text color by, choosing some things here. If I just toss something in here real quick, right, I can change the color of the text to red or whatever other color I might want to choose. I can highlight that text, various colors that sometimes can be helpful, although we usually don't do that in what we might consider to be academic type papers. And I can undo things up here or with Control Z, so I can put that back to the way it was. Some other things that you're going to use here within the Insert tab, within the ribbon up across the top, right, is the ability to put in a table, right? I can go in and get that table set up, and then I can also, as I right click in that, I can merge those two cells. For example, I could merge those 4 cells, right, however I want to do it. And then once I get that in there, for example, I can come back here to home and put that in the middle, right? Those kind of things are helpful over time to be able to do those kinds of things. And you'll have an assignment, specific assignment, to create a table that looks a certain way, right? So that'll be helpful for you as well. We're not going to spend much time in design here. Layout can be helpful, right, as we change margins, right, to some of these presets, or a custom margin, right? You can do that. You can change the orientation of the page to be portrait, right, meaning the way it's set up here where it's a little bit shorter than it is long, right, or flip it around that way in the landscape orientation. We're not going to worry about changing paper size. One of the things that is helpful over time, and you'll need to be able to do this, is to set up columns, right? And just automatically choosing 2 right here will do the whole page, right? And that's not necessarily helpful here because it's gonna jam this, right, all the way over into this one column. So I'm going to undo that, right? But as I go in here and go into column and go into more, I can still choose 2, but I just want it from this point forward, right? I don't want the whole document that way, so I could have one page that's 1 column, the next page might be 2 columns, right? Just depends on what you want to do and what you need to do within a document. So now, right, if I set that up, you'll notice it up here, right, this bar, this ruler up here that shows my what I've got set up here. If I come down just a little bit further, now you'll notice this gray area in the middle, which shows me that I've got 2 columns, right? And I can set all of this up, right, and move on. And you'll notice when I get to the bottom of this page, I'm just hitting enter on the keyboard, right? You'll notice that pops up onto the second part of that page. At any point, I can go back in and change columns. Again, I don't want to change the whole thing to 1, but I could go change back, and I can just go a section. I can go this point forward. Again, I can go the whole document, right? But now you'll notice in this middle section, I have 2 columns, right? Up here, I'm 1, and down here, right, again, 2 columns, and then down here, I'm back to 1 column, right? So I can play with those kind of things and do different things. Just depends, again, on what you want to do or what you need to do. A couple of other things just real quickly. It's interesting to be able to put references in, right? I can insert a citation, right? Meaning I used a quote from a book, or I used some news source, right? And it'll help me go in and enter an author, the title of the publication, the year, where it was published, who published it, right? I can do all of those kind of things, and I've got different types of sources that come from that, right? So here's a book, a section in a book, an article in a periodical or a journal article, right? A website, right? Those kind of things can be helpful. What's cool about this is you use the citations. It will help you not only put in the citations in the paper, right, in whatever style you need, right? APA, Chicago, MLA, right? Some of the rest of the stuff you're not going to use. But it will also create the bibliography for you at the end, right, in a, where it calls it a bibliography or references or works cited, again, depending on what you need. So those things are pretty cool, pretty helpful. We're going to do a little bit of mail merge within this as well, and that will be shown to you in a separate video that I pulled just off of YouTube. I could create my own, but this is just as easy. Another cool thing within this is if you've got multiple authors working on a paper, you can go in and, maybe this is spelled wrong. I'm going to turn this on, right? So the track changes is on. So now if I come in here and say, oh, this is actually, instead of ASDF, this one is ADSF, right? And so it'll show what I've done, right? It'll underline what I've added, and you notice that that's struck through in those other letters, right? And so now I can come in here and right click on this and say, yep, I accept that insertion into that, and it'll change it black. And I can accept, right? I can accept this deletion, right? And so that'll go away. And so now it changes it to that. So as the main person who might be coming in and looking at this, they can see how that works. Just a couple of other things to look at real quick. As I come in here and do File and then New, right? I can choose different types of documents to put in here based on whatever I might be needing to do. So if I want to create a resume from a template, right? I can click on that, and here in just a moment it'll bring in all of these different styles of resumes that I can use. Right? I don't just need, you can do something real simple, right? And that's fine, just like this. Or you can do something that's a little more fancy to try to separate yourself. As people go through 100 resumes for 2 positions, you probably need something that looks a little different. Now, you don't need to be extreme, right? And do something that's, wacky and crazy, I guess. But, it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're going into something design related, just for example, something like this probably doesn't show off what you want to do, right? Being able to create something that's a little different, a little more exciting, right? You can see, there's just your standard resume, right? Nice, and I won't call it boring, but it's simple. There's not a lot of thought put into that. But some of the rest of these can be a little different. And if you're good at this kind of stuff, and if you've gotten really good at Word, you can create these kind of things and do it yourself, right? So those things are helpful as well as you work on those kind of things. So I think that's about it. I may create another one of these videos to show a little bit more as we move along, but we're not going to spend a ton of time in Word. But because I know many of you have used this to write papers and do different things in the past, in high school or in college, depending on where you're at here. But there are other things that Word can do that are pretty powerful and pretty helpful. So, all right.